At the same time every year and since centuries, the same scene is repeated. The harvest has been brought in, but the wells are dry. The country folk gather around these yawning holes, hoping and praying that once again a new seasonal cycle will return and bring life to their fields. For the miracle to happen, the people are ready to make many sacrifices, just to have the satisfaction of once again seeing the corn grow, of having the rainy season return. The inhabitants of the Sierra de Guerrero turn to celebrations and rites that hark back to a time well before the Spanish conquest. They are ready to pay the price for their mistakes, to become martyrs, to sacrifice themselves like Christ, to appeal to legendary characters that have shaped the history of the pre-Columbian peoples, just to give themselves the chance of seeing rain fall again. There is no hatred or personal grudge between these men transformed into jaguars who throw themselves into a spectacle that is difficult to watch. One must just see in it the price they pay for their atonement and their faith to help their people. A few dozen miles from carefree Acapulco is the Sierra de Guerrero, the most deprived region of all Mexico. Here the most frequently spoken language is Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs. Here, the revolt and guerrilla warfare of the Nahua people are even fiercer than those of the Chiapas Zapatistas that we read about in the international papers. Here, drought is commonplace. The people don't just live with it, they endure it constantly. The thousands of dwarf palm trees that cling to the hills become the raw materials for local craftsmanship. Children spend whole days looking for this vegetation that requires only a minimum of water. And the fruit of their gathering becomes the raw material of a veritable means of survival for the local economy. As soon as dry, the palmillas become routine work, like a reflex. Men, women, and teenagers use their free time, sometimes all their time, weaving ropes, tresses, and hats that will be bought for a few miserable pesos on the local market. The richest of the Nahua peasants, the luckiest, have small parcels of land that they make the most of. Corn is the soul of the Mexican peasant, but it is demanding and takes a lot out of the soil. What are the others supposed to do? There isn't enough arable land and too many idle hands to let a family live in dignity. One solution remains either making do or planting complementary crops in the limited space left free by the region's major crop. The cultivation of cempasúchil, French marigolds, is one of these heaven-sent crops, for they require little land and even fewer seeds to make a little money, a godsend during the major festivals. And there is corn. The object of hope and care, corn is turned into flour, tortillas, food for men and animals, and alcohol. The markets are a good reflection of the insecurity of local economic life. On the eve of a religious feast, the marigold business attracts a few more buyers than usual. But in general, activity flows along in the rhythm of the region, in slow motion that is. Some kill time by weaving hats that they then try to sell to the half-breeds, the mestizos, who know how to turn them into profit. On the very same day, in Zitlala, a small town of 10,000 inhabitants, the market appears to have been struck by a sudden flurry of activity. The only thing that appears the same is that the mestizos are still making money on the backs of the Indians. A little more palm cords than usual are exchanged as people start gearing up for the feast of San Nicolas Tolentino. Sellers of baubles and children's toys have come to take advantage of the financial windfall brought by the feast of the town's patron saint. Pilgrims have set out for Zitlala. Some of them will have walked dozens of miles to take part in the festivities, thus saving on the bus fare. Even if it is only about 40 cents for nearly 20 miles, that's a sum not everyone here possesses. Every year for a week in early September, the Feast of St. Nicholas is a chance to come home for those who have moved away. For their families to survive, the men and young people leave Guerrero to earn a living. More and more often, for longer periods of time too. Sometimes it's better to stay home and make do with the resources the region still has. But this 1 week gives families the chance to rebind and be together for a short while. A 1,000 stars will shine in the town's church. Shopkeepers make no mistake in preparing even more candles so that the celebration is magnificent. Zitlala, in fact, means the starry place in Nahuatl. The local language is spoken by about 2 million Indians in Mexico. It was at the origin of the Aztec language and of many of the complicated names of towns and Mexican sites. Nahuatl almost vanished because of the obligation to learn Spanish imposed by the colonists. The women and old people are the ones who have saved Nahuatl. For mothers and grandparents talk to their offspring in their native language. To such a degree that in this bilingual school, children are taught to speak Spanish and write in Nahuatl. Teachers use both languages in the same course. But wouldn't it be more useful for these children who will someday have to go out and look for a job in a large Spanish-speaking town to learn Spanish? The Nahua tradition. In the Guerrero, it is both an advantage and a handicap. An advantage because it has enabled the people to keep producing quality handicrafts. It has helped sustain the old crafts, a lot of jobs, and much needed income. Also a handicap because traditional crafts are synonymous with poverty, sectarism, and racism. The Nahua Indians do not really reap the profits of their talent. The real profits go to the mestizo middlemen, who have no qualms about selling for a fortune goods they have purchased for next to nothing. Tradition also endures in those age-old practices that provide moral and physical comfort to those who haven't enough money to pay for a doctor or drugs. A healer's ritual is always surprising to see. He often calls upon the patient's mind so that he or she can contribute to the healing process. But one wonders if it still works on the younger generation, who sometimes seem only half-heartedly interested in their parents' folk methods. Finally, tradition returns during the Feast of St. Nicholas. The first Thursday in September finds the community by the river's edge for El Encuentro de Velas, the encounter of the candles. The goal of the Feast of St. Nicholas is to ask for rain. The river is the place where water and corn meet. There is a jewel celebration in every Indian ceremony. A Christian feast that takes its customs from the missionaries' teachings, and a feast with an ageless resonance. So corn and the Aztec gods are never very far from the crucifix. When asked to do so by a prayer leader, the crowd bows its head. The women are dressed in traditional hand-embroidered skirts. Gradually, characters appear and join in the ceremony. Los Moros Chinos, the Chinese Moors, are the first. They are probably a throwback to the times when Chinese Filipinos traded with the Spanish and the future Mexicans. The heads of the different districts of Zitlala meet for a final run-through. 48 bottles of mezcal, extremely potent cactus alcohol, are at their feet. They are duty-bound to drink them all before the cortege can leave the village. The tone is set. Los Chivos, the goats, have joined the worshippers. Like the Chinese Moors, they are part of those age-old characters that allude to the Spanish conquest, the migration of far-off tribes or elements of daily life. These groups of dancers with the same costumes are formed either by affinity or by district and enliven the celebrations night and day. While the district leaders hand out the mezcal and the cigarettes, other characters enter from the wings. The monarcas recall the Spanish conquest. Wearing costumes reminiscent of great childhood fears, they are meant to deride the past and present. Together, groups of dancers represent Mother Nature and the life that has to be preserved, with an eye to the next farming cycle. And for that, more than anything else, there has to be rain. Hundreds of marigolds adorn the celebration. They have been strung into necklaces or banners to decorate the arches of reeds. Candles and round balls of bread are attached to the supports. The arcos de carrizo are offerings by the people to St. Nicholas. A few hours later, the cortege heads towards the town. Other groups of dancers have by now swelled the flow of the parade. In a unique cacophony of diverse sounds and fireworks, the villagers head for a first crescendo in the festivities. At first, they place their destinies in the hands of St. Nicholas, their patron saint, whom they ask for rain. Another group of dancers has so far remained removed from the festivities. They are said to represent the Spanish soldiers, without anyone's being too sure about it. Customs and rites change with time. A lot of the elderly deplore the fact that people remember the region's customs, but have mostly forgotten their origins. The Santiagos have been joined by the Macas, the pure maidens, and head for the church too. The costumed population is now all present and ready to go meet St. Nicholas. San Nicholas Tolentino, covered with flowers, now appears in front of the church. He has dark skin like that of his worshippers. It is said that he came from La Costa Chica, the small coast, and that his features were inspired by an Afro-mulatto god. The blend of pre-Columbian and Christian beliefs is total, because it is said here that San Nicholas Tolentino is a Christian representation of Texcatlipoca, the Aztec god of the night, protector of soldiers and mistreated slaves. The odor of incense and copal resin and the light from innumerable candles gives Zitlala a new atmosphere from this moment on. The statue is placed at the foot of the altar, for St. Nicholas has other powers. He becomes curandero, the healer, for he also provides relief to the sick worshippers who demonstrate their faith. The men beat their breasts, and the women whip their heels as signs of contrition, prior to presenting their complaints to the one who may heal them. Worshippers gathered by the hundreds to make their offerings in front of the huge statue of the patron saint that rises behind the altar instead of the cross. Their fervor is as great as their offerings are small. It is at this moment that an astonishing character decides to take his place in the celebration. This character is called the Teponastle, a long, empty wooden cylinder painted in dark colors and representing enormous jaws. The Teponastle is a pre-Columbian instrument, the origins of which are lost in the mists of time. One of the oldest instruments in the Americas. It is the incarnation of a pre-Spanish god. This is why the Teponastle is feared and respected. It is kept all year long in this house. It is guarded by Los Moros, who dance before handling it. For tonight, the Teponastle comes out of its shelter. For the first time of the year, Teponastle makes its voice heard. The muted, throbbing tone of the instrument is taken up by the singer who accompanies it on its rounds through town. The mad ringing of church bells fills the air as if the sanctuary of St. Nicholas were in danger. Danger indeed, for the guards of the Teponastle rush to the square in front of the church as if to take it by storm. porters enter the church and climb the steeple. The instrument symbolizing an entire past is hoisted to the highest possible point of God's house. Teponastle has taken over control of Zitlala. The town is now ruled by a new protector, who also has to be asked to make it rain, and a new feast can begin. Hundreds of pounds of food have been piled up. The women have installed ad hoc kitchens in their houses. Whole pots of vegetables, tortillas, and incredibly hot sauces are used to accompany a profusion of beef and chicken. Eating meat is not a very frequent thing in Nahua country. The favorite dish is called mole, an enormous turkey breast steeped in hot pepper and chocolate sauce. There are hundreds of mole recipes in Mexico, but in Zitlala, they eat the mole with hot red pepper. A few hundred yards away, a family is putting the finishing touches to a mass of tangled reeds to which they attach hundreds of fat firecrackers. Veritable bombs that are cautiously decorated with ribbons and garlands. The firecracker symbolizes mankind's longing for the stars. So for the celebration to be complete in Zitlala, the starry place, everyone must see and hear it for miles around. After a nighttime climb to the top of the bell tower, the Teponastle is returned to its shelter. But in the morning, its guards pull it out to present it to the people once again. This time, Teponastle does not climb to the top of the bell tower. It takes up a place in the heart of the Zitlala church. Christianity teeters on its foundations. San Nicolas Tolentino, Zitlala's patron saint, the healer of all evils, sees two Teponastles move onto the altar where every week the Last Supper of Christ is celebrated. On either side of the Teponastles, masks have been placed on the altar, jaguar masks, the mythical animal referred to by so many pre-Columbian civilizations. Other dancers also place their masks. They come in search of blessings from their ancestral gods. Saint Nicholas seems to be absent from the church at this moment. He is no longer of interest to the faithful. The Teponastles and the jaguars reign over Zitlala. Almost simultaneously, the women end their preparations of the batches of food that they can then carry in procession to the church. The dresses are even prettier, and the bundles carefully wrapped and decorated. Another moment of the feast begins, the huentli, the offering. Teponastle is suddenly lifted off the altar by its guards, who once again lay siege to the steeple. The atmosphere is even hotter, and despite the humidity that has settled around the steeple, the Jaguar Men are part of the tradition. At the risk of falling nearly 100 feet, one by one, they go around the dome of the steeple. One last time, the incarnation of the immemorial gods makes its voice heard to the inhabitants of Zitlala. It has reminded the people of a part of their past, and for a few hours it has imposed itself upon all. It can now head back to its dwelling, to only come out again next year. The feast can continue. The women have gradually gathered and are moving in procession to the square in front of the church. Wently, the offering, enables them to have the dishes they have been preparing for 2 days blessed. The church square is now dark with people. A thin haze has appeared in Zitlala, and the feast is wetter and wetter, maybe to encourage the gods to pursue their efforts to make the real rain come. Los Moromeros have joined the celebrations. The wandering players perform. The women's parade finally enters the nave. Batches of food and live turkeys, chickens and ducks are placed at the foot of the altar. A semblance of market or farmyard settles into the place with the atmosphere of a bazaar. The families have now come to ask for the blessing of St. Nicholas Tolentino, who has reasserted his rights over the community. The parish priest even celebrates a mass. Christianity prevails again, but only for a few hours. All eyes turn towards He who can help. The petition for rain is now more than ever in the hearts of the people. As if to ask forgiveness for having been unfaithful to their patron saint for a few hours, the faithful demonstrate an even more exuberant fervor and piety. San Nicholas helps and comforts those who demonstrate their faith. So contrition gradually turns into flagellation, but this time the blows are a little more ardent. All night long, processions of worshippers file past Zitlala's crypts and chapels. Bonfires are lit, but they don't keep some people from feeling sad. Alcohol flows, and the intoxication of faith gradually gives way to just plain drunkenness. Los Chivos have been dancing practically non-stop since the beginning of the ceremonies, yet they don't seem affected by fatigue. Other processions wind their way through the town streets. The meals prepared for the Huentli have been eaten. The people file past with empty plates or cans that they've turned into drums. The alcohol continues to take hold hour after hour. But San Nicolas's blessing is going to work for the town. Right now, no one can doubt it. Now is the moment when those whose families have prepared veritable bombs come into action. The cuiteros have slipped into their reed trellises and are about to light the wicks of human fireworks. The conflagrations that follow border upon self-immolation. The danger is constant and accidents frequent. But the fireworks symbolize Zitlala, the starry place. The cuiteros embody the urge of mankind for the heavens. In their fashion, they pray so that their pleas for rain can be heard and fulfilled. But for the members of this vulnerable community, even more must be done, because all of this may not be enough. Once a year, the deep roots of the Guerrero Nahua lead the Jaguar Men to an almost inaccessible cave. A farming cycle has ended, and another must begin for everyone's survival. The men behind these masks are not just wearing a disguise. Today, they are endowed with a mission. They must bring to their people the seed of the renewed fertility of their lands. The following images are rare, for there occurs a moment when revealing the very heart of an age-old belief amounts to bearing one's very soul. That doesn't happen very often in the land of the Nahua. A small bird of prey, an eagle called the sopilote, is well known in the Sierra and about to play its role in the request for rain. The Jaguar Men enter the cave where they find fertile soil, seeds preserved by the gods. In the very heart of this pagan ritual, the Jaguar Man crosses himself before a cross, which has been placed there as a tribute to their syncretic beliefs. They have lit candles and move towards the back of the cave where they will honor the 4 points of the compass, the 4 forces of nature, their 4 immemorial gods with utterly Christian symbols. Then one of them takes a cloth and places in it a few pinches of clay from the middle of the cave. This handful of secret preserved earth constitutes the leaven and the hope of an entire community for which the Jaguars assume responsibility. The men can then return to their people and confer upon them the seed required for a new harvesting cycle. But there remains one rite to be carried out by the Nahua. They must show the gods from before Columbus that the community is pure and worthy of living a new era of fertility. They must meet the ancestral gods on the region's highest mountain. For that, the sopilote can help. The craftsman finishes the last of the Jaguar masks that were ordered. Fire-hardened leather, molded into shape, then lacquered and painted with those black spots reminiscent of the animal adored by their ancestors, but now gone from the Guerrero. With the jaguar costume goes the micayotl, a long rope rolled into a tight coil that calls for the strength of 6 men to make it into a fearsome weapon, as hard as a wooden bat. For the Jaguar men are getting ready for the final rite. They purify and sacrifice themselves so that the community may enter into contact with the gods and obtain the much-coveted mana, rain. But to obtain this rain, they must pay the price. Dozens of jaguars now converge on the town center. They become the central players in the ceremony. Despite the festive and carefree appearance, the men gradually feel more and more responsible for their mission. The mask confers a different way of thinking that makes them consider the highest interest of the entire community. The inhabitants must go in procession to the Cusco, the region's highest peak, to make a last series of offerings to the spirits. The Jaguar men accompany them on their route through town. Some of them cheat a bit about their membership to the male sex, but for the moment, the ceremony tolerates every excess. Three crosses decorated with marigolds and balls of bread have been prepared, and one group has volunteered to take them to the top of the mountain. The indelible marks of Christianity are seen even in the ceremonies most inspired by ancestral beliefs. The church is present at the heart of the celebrations. A vase is passed from hand to hand. It's filled with water from a well that hasn't yet dried up. The last drops of the liquid that is so precious for the growing corn follows the procession as if to reinforce the pilgrims' hopes. The gallons of alcohol haven't been forgotten so as to make the feast even more memorable. Everyone has some or offers some. The mezcal begins to hit, and the feast is in full swing. The procession leaves town to start the 3-mile climb towards Cusco, rising to an altitude of nearly 10,000 feet. Pretty soon, everyone finds themselves alone with the fatigue of the climb. Legs are heavy, and the levity winds down. The summit sometimes seems inaccessible. Wanting to take part in the Cusco ceremonies, some of the Jaguar men have followed the pilgrims' procession. But most of the other jaguars stay behind in Zitlala to prepare for the rest of their celebration. Cusco is an offering to the gods of the pre-Columbian heavens. It is therefore fitting to follow a ritual inspired by ancient practices. Turkeys and chickens are the basic part of the sacrifices made to the divinities. A financially significant sacrifice for a population impatiently awaiting for the season for sowing, and even more, the season for harvesting. Zitlala's neighborhood chiefs, the majordomos as they call themselves, arrive at Cusco's summit. They offer up a few drops of mezcal to the gods, then toast their arrival at the top with dignity. One after the other, the crosses arrive at the place of celebration. For the volunteer bearers, it marks the end of a veritable ordeal. Flowery crosses and arches, offerings and carnation-bedecked costumes now gather on the summit. All the trappings of an ancestral rite are associated with those of a Catholic feast. The ritual can begin. The poultry are gutted and their entrails gathered on Cusco's summit. One after the other, the animals will be hung out on long wires so that they can be presented to the gods. Legend has it that the sopilotes take them and carry the participants' wishes to the heavens. But for the ritual to succeed, pilgrims and Jaguar men must purify themselves, be perfect before presenting themselves to the gods. They must perform acts of contrition, but in Zitlala, contrition means mortification. Mortification is distressing when self-inflicted, so the jaguars line up 2 by 2 and inflict the pain for the necessary purification on each other. Without ill will, but with incredible violence, the men, armed with their mecayotls, liberate themselves from their sins by inflicting and withstanding blows whose marks will take years to disappear, but that is the price to be paid for rain to return. Occasionally, some of the participants seem to be settling personal scores. The combats of the Jaguar Men also have the effect of purging the town's internal tensions, but above all, their role is that of purification. Meanwhile, on top of Cusco, the worshippers stand before the entrails and await a sign. The arrival of the sopilotes shows that the gods have accepted their offerings. backs to the cross and facing the sun, in both a Christian and pagan fervor that only the Nahuas can feel, the women offer the smell of copal to the spirits and flagellate themselves more discreetly than the men, or make a sign of the cross so that their hopes for the return of rain may not be disappointed. At the foot of the mountain, the desire for purification has overcome the townsmen. In symbiosis with the Jaguar Men, the young and less young, according to age, square off with bare knuckles and exposed faces. They too sometimes want to settle personal scores, but everyone must agree that above all their actions demonstrate the desire to live up to the demands of their convictions. For life to continue with dignity in Mexico's most impoverished region. A few weeks later, the wells are once again full. A peaceful and nearly reassuring life has returned to Zitlala. Saint Nicholas and the pre-Columbian gods have together once again performed the miracle of new life for the corn. The precious plant, considered by the Nahuas as a part of them, of which they willingly say it is their flesh, whose legend has it giving birth to mankind, will once again be harvested. For the Nahua of the Sierra de Guerrero, as for many of the Indian minorities in Mexico, the teachings of Christ go hand in hand with the respect of the gods who dominated the Mesoamerican world for centuries. Perhaps it is because their situation is so precarious that they choose to involve them all in their hopes. Or maybe because immemorial beliefs are never entirely extinguished in the minds of those who have practiced them with such fervor for so many centuries. Fervor and conviction are vital for a minority to survive these days. So we have to hope that the Nahuas will keep the Jaguar Men in their hearts and in their towns and villages for a long time to come.